Hi, everyone. It's Friday. Yeah. I have to apologize. We're going to, well, of course, Saeed, if you want to move up. I have to apologize. The secretary will be speaking at 2:30, so we're going to do this quickly so you can all watch that. So I have a few things at the top, then we'll get right to your questions. So first, on Syria. Today, Special Envoy de Mistura said he's continuing his discussions with the regime over the humanitarian situation in Syria, and that he plans to continue the current round of talks in Geneva until Wednesday. Over the last several days, Mr. de Mistura has held daily technical meetings with the HNC delegation and cited his discussions with the Syrian opposition as useful and productive. The HNC will have technical teams in Geneva until Tuesday. Mr. de Mistura said he plans on continuing working with the regime and other Syrian groups until next Wednesday. Mr. de Mistura highlighted that after 3+ years of efforts, the discussion of a political transition is now at the center of the process. On Libya, the United States welcomes the continued and positive steps in Libya since the Government of National Accord entered Tripoli on March 30th, including early progress on peaceful, orderly transition of authority over key ministries and institutions. However, we are concerned by reports this week that spoilers again blocked a vote in the House of Representatives on endorsing the cabinet of the new government through tactics that included physically blocking access to the building. As they did in February, when the hardline minority also stood in the way of the democratic process, a majority of the House of Representative members responded by endorsing the new Libyan government through a written statement. We stand with those House members who are working to advance the political process despite intimidation. We continue to condemn efforts to undermine the Government of National Accord and the implementation of the Libyan political agreement. We urge all Libyans to continue facilitating a peaceful handover of power so Libya's new leaders can move forward with the hard work of restoring stability to their country. And with that, I'll go to Nicolas.
Thank you. Can we start with Iran and the announcement that the U.S. government is going to buy 32 tons of heavy water to Iran? Could you just elaborate what's this contract about? And just a technical question: what exactly is heavy water? And is it part of the JCPOA? And don't you fear that politically at home, the U.S. administration will be accused again to please the Iran government, given the reaction of the Republicans this morning to this deal?
Okay, so there's a lot there. So let me start with some sort of broad information. I'll answer your question on what is heavy water, because I had to get a little research on that, and then we can go on further. So you're correct. The U.S. government, via the Department of Energy, is making a license purchase of 32 metric tons of heavy water from a subsidiary of the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran. This heavy water will fulfill a substantial portion of the U.S. domestic demand this year for industry and domestic research applications. This material is not radioactive and does not present safety concerns. This transaction provides U.S. industry with a critical product while also enabling Iran to sell some of its excess heavy water is contemplated in the JCPOA. Iran's compliance with the JCPOA meant this material had already been removed from Iran, ensuring it would not be used to support the development of a nuclear weapon. Our purchase of the heavy water means it will instead be used for critically important research in non-nuclear industrial requirements here in the United States. We expect the heavy water to be delivered to the U.S. in the coming week, initially stored at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and then resold at commercially reasonable prices to domestic commercial and research buyers. So on technical details about what heavy water is and details on its implementation, I'm going to refer you to the Department of Energy. But I will say heavy water is used in the development, production, and sale of compounds used in chemistry, biomedical and diagnostic research, environmental analysis, and physics. So I know you had a question too on U.S. domestic reaction, and our response would be no. You know, this was actually an allowable event that happened. So the U.S. was under no obligation to purchase heavy water from Iran, nor is it obligated to do so in the future. But the JCPOA required Iran to reduce its heavy water inventory below the 130 metric ton limit. One way to do that was to sell the excess to countries or companies. And I just note in the future, it's possible other countries may wish to purchase that. This was a purchase that was arranged through the Department of Energy for that.
Can I follow up
Of
on
course you
that?
can, Pam.
Thank you. House Foreign Affairs Chairman Ed Royce is among those who've been critical, saying the deal actually encourages Iran to produce more heavy water to sell. House Speaker Paul Ryan also had some criticism, saying it seemed to be part of an effort to sweeten the nuclear deal with Iran and would directly subsidize Iran's nuclear program. Is there state concern about this criticism in that the U.S. may be seen as enabling Iran with this purchase?
No. This limit ensures Iran cannot stockpile heavy water for use in a covert reaction. The IAEA's monitoring and verification measures will ensure that we know if Iran attempts to exceed the limit or divert any of the heavy water for illicit production of plutonium. So
Did
no.
the Secretary discuss this with Saudi officials and with other GCC members ahead of the purchase? And if so, what was their reaction?
So I'd say the discussions regarding this commercial transaction have been ongoing for some time, primarily between the Department of Energy and their Iranian counterparts. And while the contracts were signed today in Vienna, this was a bilateral transaction between the U.S. and Iran.
We go to Syria?
Wait, are we done on Iran? And then we'll go.
Elizabeth, aren't you concerned, though, that the United States is subsidizing Iran's nuclear program?
No, this was a commercial transaction. It actually met a U.S. need, as I outlined in this, and it also helped Iran meet its obligations under the JCPOA.
How much money are we talking about for this?
It's under 10 million.
But aren't you concerned that some of this under 10 million will fund terrorist activities in the
So
future?
we've talked about this quite extensively from this podium as well as elsewhere, Lucas. No one's blind to Iran's unhelpful activities in the region. On this, you know, what we can say is this was a commercial transaction. It was allowable. It fills a need here in the United States.
Will this transaction happen with U.S. dollars or U.S. taxpayer dollars?
So on that, I'm going to refer you to the Department of the Treasury,
Well, why can't you answer that question? It's a simple yes or no.
because that's a question for Treasury. Thanks.
And what about the
Saeed?
sanctions?
So
Elizabeth?
this is actually allowable under the JCPOA. If you're talking about future decisions on sanctions, I'm not going to preview that. Okay. Saeed?
Can we go to Syria
Of course
real
we
quick? But by the way, who's transporting the heavy water? Is it U.S. transports or?
You know, I don't know that. Why don't I have, I'll have our technical people look at that. I think it's probably a question for energy, but we can take a look.
I want to go to Syria.
Of course.
You mentioned at the top what Stefan de Mistura said. He also said that the cessation of hostilities is facing a looming danger, that it could collapse at any moment. And now I know Mr. de Mistura is not someone who has a penchant for being hyperbolic or anything. So he gave it like a 3-day window till Wednesday and so on. Can you share with us any information that you might have on this issue?
Well,
or
so
how
the
it could go
president
forward?
just spoke to this as well from London. You know, as we've said, you know, several times, as the president just said, as Mr. de Mistura just said, you know, the cessation of hostilities faces serious threats due to persistent violations by the Assad regime. This is something that we continue to see, we continue to raise. You know, President Obama has stressed to President Putin the importance of pressing the Syrian regime to halt its offensive attacks on that. I'm not going to give a timeline. I don't think I can from this podium. You know, Mr. de Mistura has spoken on this, but we are absolutely concerned.
Okay. How is this, in your opinion, is juxtaposed against reports that say that the Syrians, the Russians, and with the help of Iran, are poised to attack Aleppo? You know,
In terms of the battlefield movement, or
it's
are
almost
these?
imminent that
Yeah.
they are going to move in to liberate Aleppo. Do you have any information on this?
You know,
This could be tied to it in any way?
You know, I can't say that. I can't say that there's a grand strategy.
Okay.
Taking a look at this, I would say the cessation of hostilities, though it has certainly not been perfect, and no one is blind to that, has improved the life for, you know, tens, hundreds of thousands of Syrians on a daily basis, which is what we wanted to happen. Is it under threat? Absolutely. The president spoke to this today, as did Mr. de Mistura. Do we think it's continued, that there's validity, that we continue to press it? Absolutely, because there's no alternative. You know, this provides the ability, as Mr. de Mistura said, where the political transition finally is in place to talk. Okay? Syria.
The tensions between the Kurdish forces and the Assad regime have recently built up, and over the past 2 days there have been clashes resulting in the deaths and wounding of a number of people. Does the United States have a position on that, on this new tension between Assad and the Kurds, who have remained neutral more or less towards each other?
Well, you know, certainly we would say, you know, the Peshmerga, the Kurds have been some of the most effective fighters on the ground against ISIL, and that's something that we welcome. We've supported, that we have, highlighted repeatedly. In terms of these new tensions, I can't speak to that specifically, but I would say, you know, certainly the Pesh have been very focused where we
I'm talking
need
about the
that.
Syrian Kurds, not the Peshmerga in Iraq,
Okay.
the Syrian Kurds.
Is the fight between
With the Assad forces and the Syrian Kurds.
Yeah.
It's in Syria.
Okay. So on that, you know, I'm aware of those reports. I don't really have anything to add on that. You know, this is yet again, you know, a concern as we take a look at the cessation of hostilities. Okay. I know I want to go to Lalit here.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you about the Kabul terrorist attack this week.
Yes.
Voice of America today ran a big story about quoting presidential spokesperson from Kabul, saying that this attack has a hallmark of Taliban and the Haqqani network, and they are putting the blame on the Pakistani establishment because they have a direct links with the Haqqani network.
And I'm sorry, where was that spokesperson from?
Afghanistan's president's spokesperson.
Okay. I haven't seen that.
Dawa Khan Minapal.
Okay. I haven't seen that direct statement, but what I can say is that attacks such as this clearly undermine U.S., Afghan, and Pakistani efforts to promote peace and reconciliation in Afghanistan. We have consistently expressed our concerns at the highest level of the government of Pakistan about their continued tolerance for Afghan Taliban groups, such as the Haqqani network, operating from Pakistani soil. And we did again after this week's attack. We have pressed the government of Pakistan to follow up on its express commitment not to discriminate between terror groups, regardless of their agenda or their affiliation, by undertaking concrete action against the Haqqanis.
But your tolerance with Pakistan's tolerance with this network is not a new thing. Means you have been tolerating these Pakistan's tolerance with Haqqani network for quite some time.
I direct you back to what Pakistan authorities have said themselves. You know, they've reiterated their commitment that they will not discriminate against those groups, and we continue to call on them to live up to that
But
commitment.
do you see the words match with the actions?
I think words matter, and we continue to encourage them to have their actions match those words.
Thank you.
On peace process,
Yep.
French foreign minister has said today that an international conference in Paris on May 30 is in a bid relaunch talks between Palestinians and the Israelis. Did you get more information from the French about this conference? Are you coordinating with them now, and do you support such a conference?
So we've actually just received specifics regarding substance and timing of this conference. We continue to be in touch directly with the French and other stakeholders to discuss the substance on there. You know, we obviously remain concerned about the situation and continued trends on the ground. And it's why we continue to look at both sides to demonstrate with actions and politics a genuine commitment to the two-state solution. In
And
terms
this-
of details, content, who's attending, I just don't have that level of granularity.
But based on this information, the U.S. will attend this conference?
Again, with scheduling and who's going to attend, attendance at all, I don't have that granularity. We've just received that information, so we'll continue to look, and maybe I'll have an update for you later.
But
Is it a good idea to have an international conference on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, or do you still favor direct negotiations?
You know, our position on direct negotiations hasn't changed, but on this, as we've just received the information, literally, we're taking a look at it, and we'll be in touch with the French, and hopefully have an update for you guys as well.
Conference contradict the bilateral talks between the
I wouldn't say contradict, but you know, without getting too far ahead of taking a look at that information, I don't want to make a decision on that from the podium.
Let
Now,
me just, can I just follow up
Of course.
on this issue,
Of
very,
course,
very
Saeed.
quickly. I'm just, because the French also said it should have guarantees. I mean, it should not just be another meeting because they've had so many meetings on the Middle East. Do you agree with that?
Well,
concept or with
I'd
that
agree.
premise?
I'd say that we agree with the concept that we need to see progress. You know, and going back to Lalit's question, again, this is one of those things where words matter and actions need to match words. As you know, we continue to call for the reduction of tensions, the reduction of rhetoric. I can't speak specifically to this because, again, we're just seeing the context on this. We're taking a look at the details. I don't have anything to share on that.
Could I get you to comment on a report that Israel has confiscated 115 dunams of land, which is about 40 acres and so on, for settlement building today?
And I actually did the math on that to see exactly what a dunham was. So we are aware of the reports. This appears to be the latest step in what appears to be an ongoing process of land seizures, settlement expansions, and legalizations of outposts that is fundamentally undermining the prospects for a two-state solution. So we've repeatedly made clear we continue to look to both sides to demonstrate with actions and policies that commitment to a two-state solution. I'm going to go to the gentleman in the back because 1 second, Michelle, because he was here yesterday and we didn't get a chance to call on him.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth.
Yep.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Last Friday, a heavily armed gunmen from South Sudan crossed the Ethiopian border into Gambela region and killed 208 innocent Ethiopians, including women and children. And they also kidnapped more than 100 children. As you probably heard, Ethiopia declared 2 days of national mourning for the 208 people killed. Ethiopia also announced on Wednesday that its military force entered South Sudan and surrounded the attackers who abducted the children. My question, Elizabeth, what is the United States position regarding this attack on Ethiopian soil?
Okay. So first I'm going to say there's a lot there. So first, our condolences and our thoughts are with the victims and those impacted by this. You know, we are concerned by the reports of the attacks in Gambela region of Ethiopia. At this point, we don't have information on the motive of attack. We've been informed that the Ethiopian authorities are responding to the immediate needs of those affected communities. They're carrying out the investigation. I've also seen reports that the Ethiopian forces are pulling out the children in that. For that, I'm going to refer you to the government of Ethiopia and South Sudan because I just don't have clarity on what's going on in the ground. Okay. Yep. And you guys, you're going to hate this. I can take two more because I want to get you out before S goes
Sure. The foreign minister of North Korea spoke at the UN yesterday, and essentially he blamed the U.S. for failure in progress on talks and said that the only way to meet the threat from the U.S. was for them to have nuclear weapons. Do you have a response to that?
We disagree.
And
Yep.
he also had a chance to speak with Foreign Minister Zarif. Is there any concern, given the history between North Korea and Iran, that they might be talking about?
Yeah, I can't
Any of those
speak to a
activities?
meeting of two foreign leaders like that. Sir?
Thank you. Elizabeth, the Army and American lobby groups learned from representatives of administration that President Obama won't call the events in 1915 as genocide during his statement that will come out soon. The
It
question
actually
is,
came out.
It already came out
Yes,
today.
sir, it did.
Okay, and then obviously there as we learned before, there is no genocide term in this statement. Can you please tell why this administration avoids using the genocide term when about already 30 countries, approximately 30 countries, starting from allies like democratic allies like Germany or France to not most democratic maybe country like Venezuela, has already called the events of 1915 as genocide. And President Ronald Reagan in 1981 as president also called the events of 1915 as genocide. Why can't this administration do the same? Thank you.
In terms of the president's statement, you know I'm going to refer you to the White House. What I would say, though, is read this statement. It's a very powerful statement, came out just about an hour ago. He remarked on, he actually termed it the first mass atrocity of the 20th century. He noted the 1.5 million Armenian people who were deported, massacred, marched to their deaths in the final days of the Ottoman Empire. The president also remarked on the remarkable resilience of the Armenian people. So I would refer you to the White House to speak specifically on this, but I would say read the statement because it's very powerful, and he speaks. Pam?
I'm sorry, can I follow
just
up
actually,
briefly?
let me go one more, and then
Okay,
I'm happy to
question,
talk.
please. Thank you.
Hi, Pam.
Two quick ones, if
Sure.
I can. The first one, what's the state perspective on the widening political crisis in Macedonia, which of course has resulted in the massive pro and anti-government demonstrations this week? And then secondly, do you have an update concerning U.S. relief for the earthquake victims in Ecuador?
Okay. So on Macedonia, you know, we in the EU have made our concerns known about the importance of credible elections in Macedonia. Time is short. Much remains to be done. We strongly urge President Inanov to rescind his decision and let the Special Prosecutor's Office and the courts do their job. I would refer you to some of the statements that we've made on that. Quickly on Ecuador, and thank you for the question, because I think sometimes things move very quickly on, and the people of Ecuador are very much in our thoughts. You know, the United States is responding to the humanitarian needs in Ecuador in several different ways. USAID has deployed a team of disaster experts to assist the government of Ecuador by assessing damage, identifying priority humanitarian needs, providing information and analysis of the situation in the ground. They've also deployed a small team of structural engineers with urban search and rescue partners from the Los Angeles County Fire Department, Fairfax, Virginia Fire and Rescue. They're surveying buildings and critical infrastructure in the most affected areas. They've also deployed a small support team to work with UN's disaster assistance and coordination team to help coordinate the flood of international rescue activities. They provided an initial $100,000 to support the distribution of emergency relief supplies to communities impacted, and they're contributing $500,000 through the UN World Food Program to provide food vouchers in especially hit areas. Additional U.S. government assistance may be forthcoming based on assessments and also the government of Ecuador's request. One more, you're it, my friend.
What do you tell critics who say that the United States is rewarding Iran's behavior for producing excess plutonium or heavy water that could be used to produce
So
plutonium?
I think it's important to realize that actually Iran was below the 130 metric ton threshold before this was purchased.
And why can't you say whether this is Iran's sanctioned money or new U.S. dollars or U.S. taxpayer dollars being used to purchase this heavy water?
I'm sorry, I don't think I understand your question.
What kind of dollars are being used to purchase this heavy water from Iran?
Okay, so this was actually facilitated through the Department of Energy, so I'm going to refer you there.
And
Thanks, guys.
Okay.